Hello and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today we have a fantastic podcast for you. We are talking with Larkin Seiple, the DP of Everything Everywhere All at Once. Larkin also shot, Swiss Army Man, almost every great music video you've seen, This Is America, with Childish Gambino, Gold with Chet Faker, the girls rollerblading behind the car. Smooth Sailing by Queens of the Stone Age, one of my favorite bands. Just a whole Turned Down for What? Just a whole bunch of amazing visual work out of Larkin, and we talk about most of it. I will say we recorded this podcast in April. The movie Everything Everywhere had just come out, but I don't even know if it was like fully in theaters all the way yet. So if there's any anachronisms, if the timelines don't seem to match up with today, that's because we were talking in April. But even so, amazing conversation. Loved it. Larkin's great. And I think you're going to enjoy this one. So I will let you get to enjoying. Here's my conversation with Larkin Seiple. I was actually at the screening over at City Walk.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I got that little. Is the movie being shown in IMAX very much, or is that was that like a special thing?
I think that was like a special thing. Yeah, it was. I think that was a special thing. It was a bummer because we were originally going to shoot the rock sequence on IMAX
Right.
for the film. We were legit prepping for that. And I was pushing it, and then I think a mix of number crunching and we can't get IMAX cameras out to the desert.
Right.
It's going to be too hard. We had a crew of 7 that day. Me, the directors, and an AC basically.
Yeah. Was the intent just to say you had shot that sequence on IMAX, or was there a creative reason?
Yeah. I mean, it was a bit of both. I think a lot of the ideas were wouldn't it be really dumb?
Yeah.
If we shot, because it was also financial incentive was it's just 2 rocks. It's 200 feet of film.
Right.
It's just a roll. Let's just grab it and knock it out, and we can say we shot on IMAX. I think that'd be really funny for this film. And we were going to shoot Super 8 and 16 mil originally at one point too. We were prepped for it, and then on the day when we did all the flashbacks, we had 5 locations in one day. And it was Kinky Universe, then the Wushu Universe, and then run down an alley, shoot that 6 times at different variations. And it was okay, we're not going to switch cameras and switch to film stocks at this point.
36-day shoot turns into a 200-day shoot real fast.
Oh yeah, no, it was, even 36 felt short.
Yeah. You said, we're kind of jumping ahead, but I might as well just ask right now. You said you shot 10 different sets of lenses in 6 formats?
Yeah, we shot, we think we did 16:9, 4:3, 1.85, 2.35, 2:1. And then there's weird formats in the middle, but I think so probably wasn't necessarily 10 formats, but we went through the full range and got cute about it and got snarky. The hot dog fingers is the Netflix aspect ratio, which is 2:1. We started out trying to make that look like the Todd Haynes' Carol.
Right.
And then we were the whole universe is in this one apartment, and everything is, if we had done that, we kind of would have lost a lot of the joke. Because Carol is so subjective we were no, we should make this a bit more blunt. The people have hot dog fingers on. We still got a little funky with the framing, but overall we started kind of just leaning in on showcasing the production design for that world. If you go back and watch it, everything in there is hot dog color. There's not another color that exists. It
is a very pinkish tan apartment.
With hints of red and yellow.
Yeah. What was I going to say after? Because normally I start different, but I did. The film is just so fucking good. But we'll get to that. I did want to start kind of how we normally start, which is just saying, I know you've said you went to Emerson, where you kind of didn't meet the Daniels, but around them and stuff like that. When you were, prior to college and stuff, when you were a kid, were you deep into film? Did you start, as an engineer or something and then move your way in, or was it kind of always the path?
I was actually just talking to Daniel Scheinert about this last night. I think I was at summer camp and the counselor put on 16 Candles. I forget how old I was, and it's like an edgy movie. I think I was maybe 10, maybe 9, and there was like cursing and there was like nudity in it, and I was just shocked. And the counselors were like, it's rated PG. And then I spent the next like 2 years going to Blockbuster and diving into PG 80s films, trying to like find my version of the R film because I wasn't allowed to watch R-rated movies. So then I just
Right.
started watching a lot more movies and inadvertently some very good films. And then as I got older, like my mom was a dentist in the suburbs. And so I would just go to like a cinema, buy one ticket, and then see 6 movies. I
Yeah.
remember like walking out of Good Will Hunting and going into like Phantoms, then going into like Speed 2 Cruise Control, or like seeing Save It Private Ryan and seeing like, vets like having full meltdowns in the theater, things like that. I kind of just fell into movies just because that's what was around. And then I just got into it, as a kid, like, if you're around something that just becomes your thing.
Yeah.
And then, eventually I just got nerdy about it and it became my thing. I didn't really like click with the filmmaking process until college. And even when I got there, it's like, I'm a director. And then I was like, I think directors only get to make one film a year.
Right.
I did something else. If I was a cinematographer, I get to work on like 10 films a year. And that sounded a lot better.
Yeah. That's definitely a hard part for it was me for all intents and purposes, but anyone kind of coming up nowadays is like I've had to be especially for like industrials or just like whatever, even music videos. It's like, and so you're shooting the whole thing, and I'm like, do we have a budget to pay literally anyone else? They're like, no, you have to write it too. I'm like, fucking God. Juggling that many jobs sounds like a nightmare, but people do it.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Could you, so you get to Emerson, you're working on, you make that not transition to DP, but you're working on, becoming a DP, I suppose. What did you have any outside inspiration, besides just films? Were there other, maybe photographers or maybe music even, or anything like that was kind of tickling your artistic brain?
Not really. No, I think when I got to Emerson, within a week, I met a kid named Matt Ardeen, and he was like, "Do you want to work on a movie?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to work on a movie." This is at a party. He was like, "Great, shooting a feature starting this weekend." And I was like, "Great." And then he was like, "It's all nights." And I was like, "Perfect." And then I spent like a month working nights, then getting back at 6 a.m. and then going to school at 7. And I had a blast. And I think I fell in love with like the camaraderie of what it's like to be in a crew. Like,
Right.
just like hauling sandbags and cable through a forest in the middle of, in the middle of Massachusetts at night, and like chain smoking cigarettes with a bunch of other 18-year-olds. It was like camp basically. And that's when I started like clicking into like what I liked about filmmaking, which was like a bunch of people making a story together. That kind of became like the drug or like the fun part about like just a bunch of people doing something kind of stupid in a weird way, or like not stupid, but ridiculous. You have all these people, putting all this time and energy, and you cut to like 2 people at a table. Just something very absurd about it. All the effort that goes into something that you hope is going to be great. And then it's film school, nothing is great. It's all just the worst. But it's the best. I loved going to film school screenings as a kid, just like blown away watching other students, because also everyone was shooting film still. So just watching people that had nothing to do with cinematography, that was not who they were. Like watching like the writer be the guy that's shooting the short this week, and just watching him like either fail or like stumble into something that works great. It was kind of like a weird science experiment.
That I went to this New York Film Academy like summer program before I went to college.
I did too.
Oh, word, the one in LA?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so did that. And I remember because they having us all shoot 16 for our like we were always shooting 16. There was like at that time there was like another program called the digital program, and we were all like poo poo the 5D. Or no, I guess at that time it would have been a DVX. Anyway, but I just remember when we were in the screening theater at WB showing everyone's films, and all of our movies looked kind of the same ish. And then one person who what was her name? Adriana. I remember her name. This is like 20 years ago. I remember hers looking like a movie. Like she exposed it correctly. Like she lit it, although we didn't really have lights, but like it looked like a movie. And I just remember sitting there and going, wow, okay, it is possible. Because before that, we were all, doing whatever 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds do when they don't know any better.
Point the light at the actor, right?
Yeah.
Read it. We can go. We're good.
Yeah. So that sort of camaraderie and seeing how everyone works together that you're talking about, I think is incredibly important.
Yeah, I think we had one kid in our program that actually made a good film. I think ended up doing like a stupid comedy about two guys running around our apartment complex. And I remember we were at it, and I was using the score from Requiem for a Dream, and I thought it was really funny because that was the big movie at the time. And the guy teacher whatever came up, and he was like, "You can't use this song," and I was like, "No one's ever going to see it. Who cares?" And he was like, "4 other kids are also using this song. If you use it." They're making dramas. If you use it as a comedy, you're gonna ruin their screening. So I switched it to like the Batman theme or something absurd. But it was very surreal. You have all these filmmakers and they're all using the exact same references for the films they're making. Very much an echo chamber.
Yeah, I remember freshman year of college when The Dark Knight came out, or like maybe sophomore year, and it was like in the acting class we had to take, everyone did Joker monologues. It's just like, all right, knock it off. Stop. You knocked that off. What was your experience like at NIFA? Because you're the first person I met who actually did the exact same like program that I did.
I mean, teachers were okay. I mean, it was like a drug-fueled party for 16-year-olds and 18-year-olds. It was like going to college when you were in high school. It was just a big, like, not drug-fueled, but it was California.
It certainly
so
felt
like,
that way.
Yeah. There was booze and pot around, and it was a blast. And you're like living with a bunch of other teenagers in apartments, and like you had the time of your life. I had such a great time. Like, couldn't get enough of it. We got to make short films. The teachers were pretty instructive. But it was just an excuse to you're living in California for like a month, like with a bunch of other people, a bunch of other strangers your age. You're just gonna have generally a good time and get into trouble. And I think even the counselors are like, why are we counselors to like 16 and 18-year-olds? This is they're maybe 2 years older than us.
Right.
It was fine. I presume having shot these like weird little 16 mil films that may have actually helped me get in college to be like, hey, look, I've shot something on film back then that probably felt kind of unique. Was it good? I'm sure it wasn't. I wish I still had them. They were very silly. It was very much like a last minute thought process of like, I guess I'll make a short film about this and like just go for it. And of course, like I think all the films starred the counselors or like the people in you. It was either that or your friends. Like only a couple of kids had like the balls to actually cast actors. Most of us were like, what if you just did it? Because I think I can talk to you. I can't talk to a stranger. Yeah.
Yeah, I ended up TAing there for a while, for a couple summers, and I ended up in a lot of.
Yep, exactly right.
You're only slightly older than me, but can you do you remember sort of that transition from needing to shoot film, where that was completely out of reach for making your film and what that environment was like versus when the DVX came out, when digital cinema cameras became a little more approachable, and like what you ended up working like then?
Yeah, it was a weird. I graduated and I just shot my first short on like 35 mil, and like half of those shorts up there was like this ambitious short that like never really got finished. I was super stoked about it, and like never really got finished. And I was like, 35 looks amazing. And then I worked at a camera house, and then I just slowly watched over like the next 6 months. Like this is 2007. Like the film cameras just get dustier, and like the HVX was coming up, and then the lens adapters came out, and watching that transition. It was also just like all the short films that I was trying to work on or piece together. Like the idea of shooting on film just started feeling not tangible anymore. The very first commercial I ever shot was like 2 months after college, and it was like a pickup for like a world poker tournament, and it was just like like one shot of like a player like throwing a card at camera, but it was on like 35 mil, and I was just like terrified because I'd only shot it once, and I was like, they were like, "Do you want to prep the camera?" And I didn't even know the camera, so I turned, and then they were giving me like a full rate to prep it, and I was like, "No, you can hire someone else who knows what they're doing. I'm lost." But that was like the one time I shot film was the first. I'm not even going to call it a commercial. I shot an insert for a commercial.
Right.
And then I don't think I touched it again until it became like back in fashion. Like it was like started shooting a lot on HVX. Then it was like HVX of adapter. And then it became like, the Red One, then the Red MX. And then it took a while for film to become kind of like, people actually choosing, I had to do that weird cycle of film as a standard to like, why would we ever shoot film, to like, don't we miss film? Isn't film going to make the project better? So I just basically everyone I was working with was just, too broke to even afford film for a long time. And it was more just like whoever owned a camera. So I owned an HVX, but I never ponied up the money to own a Red or an Alexa, which had good results and bad results. I definitely lost jobs to Red owners, like at the very beginning of when that started happening.
Yeah. Do you think that still happens? Because I feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like the sort of buying a Red buys you a job era is sort of coming to a close.
I think so. I mean, I think you can make some of my favorite things. For the longest time, I shot on like a 5D that I had done. I mean, now you can buy, an Alexa Classic for what, $5,000, $6,000. Like, I think that camera, I just looked it up. That camera still slaps. Like, it's still like the same chip. Like, you can get great looking images with a very, not necessarily affordable, but you don't have to. Yeah, I'm hoping we're at a place where people can, get a camera that looks decent, even like the C3. Like most of the cameras, again, once you throw them into the color grade too, like it's minutia you're talking about at that point. Like you can get a fully functional film camera. Even the Blackmagic looks great. Like even like the little guy, like that's to me like the best match for Alexa I've found. I'm hoping that's gone and people can just focus more just on someone's reel, and not about what they can just monetarily bring to a project. Yeah. But also it's a sign that if you're getting hired for a job and it's just about your resources, it's probably not going to be a good job. Or like the director probably isn't thinking about it for the right reasons.
Yeah. There's a few things I kind of want to unpack in that answer, but the importance of a reel, do you think that has diminished? Because a few of the DPs we've spoken to recently have kind of mentioned that it's really just about your last project and reels don't tend to serve a purpose anymore.
Yeah, I think, reels
beyond you,
I think existed. Reels existed because it was really hard to show everyone your work / your work wasn't accessible. So that's why, everyone, I think everyone had like 3 or 4 tracks that they loved for their reel. I think my first reel was put to the last of the Mohican soundtrack. I was very excited about it. It was just like 4 or 3 films intercut throughout, but you kept going back to the previous films. It was, but no, I think reels are dead. I don't think there's any purpose. I also don't like reels because anyone can take, 2 good shots from a short film and show those off, and the rest of the short film is garbage. It's like you got 2 shots at dusk and then the rest of your stuff isn't good. I always think you should be judging people based on projects, because if they can make you have to be able to make at least one competent project all the way through, or one great project all the way through. Because I think the best websites, I think your website should be incredibly reductive. Like my favorite cinematographers, their websites are like, here's 4 projects. Like, as opposed to like, I've known you shot hundreds, but like, here's 4. These represent what I do, or these are what I'm proud of. Like, there's no need for me to be like, look, I can also do a comedy, or look, I can do sports. It's like, no, here are the 4 things that I can bring to the table. I think that's the most important. And last project too, but a lot of times, I think you're going to just have those, like, everyone's going to create their own iconic work, and that they're going to kind of live off of, like that one commercial that you're always going to get reference for. Right. A lot of times for me, it's like I have to have like a secret reel from my agent for like bright, shiny stuff, because a lot of my stuff's too moody or dramatic. And it's like, no, look, I can shoot really bright, real flat, real dumb. If I want to, if I want to pick up a job that's in town and I don't want to, Also like the cool moody projects, everyone's going for those. So there's usually a lot of like people in kitchens on phones, like doing minutia with an app. Like that's like, the majority of commercials in Los Angeles. So I'm like, oh, look, I can do those. I can keep the crew happy and fed by doing those while we wait to go do like a crazy movie.
Yeah. I mean, you got to pay the bills. They're not all going to be fucking the best. They're not all going to be sweatpants.
No. Well, a lot of it's like, a lot of the projects are frustrating because I'm kind of just want to shoot something very like, if it's going to be a commercial, I want it to be like simple and blunt and let's just get this done. Or I want us to like go for it and like push it and like make it actually like, we're going to try. Almost every commercial, like not almost everyone, but the majority of them are like, this is a really stupid commercial, but we're going to really try. And you're just like, no, we can't, the concept alone isn't worth us pushing it. So you get a lot of middle ground spots that think they're being really clever, but they're not, or that think they're going to be great, but they don't have the money or time to actually go for what they're doing. So you just end up getting in trouble a lot generally. That's like a lot of those middle ground spots.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I've certainly run into, clients who think that they have the greatest idea, not just even for the commercial, but just like their thing, whatever their product or their service or their business. And they're like, we want this to look like the highest budget film ever. And we're going to give you $2,000 to do it. And, crew, whatever. How do you kind of talk people down to like, let's keep this pared down and simple, basic elements, and it'll be effective?
I think it's, when I was when I first started shooting commercials, I was very game to take those concepts and go with it and push it. And, I usually get brought on very last minute, everything's been figured out for the most part. And I get, I jump on for the scout and then I'm like, cool location you guys found. I think we can make it work. Let's go. But if I had director friends that had commercials that they thought could be good, but they had no money, I would director scout with them a bunch, or we'd figure out like how we can, reuse a location, or maybe we moved it to this part of town. We could, change the scene to dusk because we're not going to be surrounded by wall. We could, you can start gaming it. You can start figuring out. I mean, the solution to making anything great is just prepping the shit out of it. You just got to figure out. And by that, it's not just, I think everyone will say like prep, but it's trying to focus what that means, which is problem solving what's holding you back, as opposed to just, I think everyone hears prep and they go, oh, you're going to shot list and then you're going to storyboard and then you're going to, it's more just trying to like identify what you're not going to be able to change on the day and get that figured out far in advance so that on the day you can have room to change variables around.
Sure.
But at the same time, I don't, at this point, like, commercials come so fast that director scouting a commercial now seems kind of crazy in terms of I get hit up like maybe 2 weeks before something wants to go. But that's just the US. I feel like Europe, they have like, 2 months before they shoot a commercial, they're reaching out to crew. And here it's like, what are you guys doing next week? Is your crew around? Do you guys mind working nights? Like,
what's funny is I a few years ago, I shot a spot for Mini with this group that came in from Germany, and they were like super apologetic that they could only hire actors to do basically nothing for $600 a day. They're like, this is all we can do. And I was like, we'll find someone. Like, definitely find someone for, like, it was like just a run and gun, no equipment, just like following people walking through Santa Monica or whatever. And then, yeah, they prepped for 2 months. And then afterwards they went on a 2-month vacation. And I was getting a lot of angry phone calls from various people like, hey, how come I haven't been paid yet? And I'm like, they're not in the office. I don't know where they are. They turned off their phones.
Yeah. Usually, I forget. I think very early on as an electrician, I remember watching like gaffers or key grips, like find out that production was from outside the country and be like, we need cash in hand at the end of the day before you leave.
Oh, is that pretty?
Because things like that would happen. Yeah, no, it was a thing. It was just like if you found out that the production company was not only from outside the city or the country, and that they were leaving the next day after, like, that's also like on some of the smaller, scrappier spots that you're working on. Right. Or like even scrappier web series. Back in the day, we had that issue.
Yeah.
Back when, are web series still a thing? They're not a thing, right? It's just streaming now, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure people are my friend Shannon made a web series that she took to a bunch of festivals and won a handful of awards for. So but I think it's far more low budget, a little more student filmy than
Gotcha. Yeah.
what it used to be. Have you always been a very technical cinematographer, like, more nerdy, or no?
Um, I think I've been pretty nerdy for like a long time. Like when I first got into film, I got really into like the chemical part of it, and I only ever got to make up one print, one short. But I remember loving the idea of I was also like watching like and reading about Savides and Kanji and the Cord and all these guys that were doing so much work to the negative to make their own look.
Yeah.
Um, that's what really got me into that side of it, even before like the glass and the lighting. And then when I was at school, I came up on the lighting side. I started like just juicing and gripping, and then best bowing and wanting the gaff, and I just kind of just got into that part. I think the idea of like the thing about lighting is basically you're putting 10 variables on set, and if you make a different concoction every time, like, you can keep tweaking. I mean, like that's the first taste you get of cinematography is tweaking lighting. And so once that happened, I got really excited. And then you could just, as a kid, you're looking at, magazines of like crazy rigs or crazy lights, and everyone's like fiending for like HMIs. I think one of the bigger remember like a memorable experience I had was like on my like the film that I was the most proud of at school. Like we had like a 2.5 HMI panned onto the scene, and I was like metering it and looking at it, and it was like, I think I had to pan it off. I think it's too much, and I don't think it looks good. And it was like a big deal. They're like, but that's the big gun we got. And I was like, I know, but I think we can just use these like little tiny par cans. It'll look better. And like got back to like, got the dailies back, and I was like, I was right. It looks better. But it was like it was very silly. Like all of like the weight you put on the equipment, like a big gun, or like, being able to shoot 35/16, things like that. Yeah. I'm not sure where this question was going.
Oh, well, the main reason I asked was just because, there seems to be I have a theory. I also am very scatterbrained, so I apologize. But so I have a theory that the sort of whatever you want to call it, quote unquote, current generation is so enamored with photochemical film and vinyl and analog stuff because they grew up in an era where none of that was made available. Everything was for the past 20 years, everything is ephemeral and digital and not tangible. And so there's been, I'm sure you've seen this heavy push to shoot digital and give it, quote unquote, the film look. And I was wondering if you had an opinion on what that actually is, or whether or not it's relevant to make stuff look like film beyond just aesthetically wanting to do that. And B, since you've shot a lot of film, how you were shooting film versus how you shoot digital from more of a practical sense. It's a lot to unpack. I'm sorry.
There's a lot. I mean, a lot of like, there's this big push for everyone to shoot film. And I remember being so stressed out just trying to get my eye wrapped around film. Just like you needed so much more exposure than your eyes used to. And like a lot of it was just getting your eye dialed into what you thought, on set, you could see it and it would look like my face is blown out now. And I'd be like, oh, that looks too much. But later it's all going to be there. Like having to build your eye took ages. And I never like, as soon as I like got close to like, I think I understand how film looks now, how to light film, digital came in. And then the next time I came back to film, I was like, oh shit. I had to like kind of relearn, pull out the meter, like, try to shoot some tests. Like I get why. I mean, if I shoot film now, I generally want to shoot it for the flaws. Like, I'm dying to do a movie that's just 16 mil, no lighting. It's just capturing it and seeing it and giving it this like maybe potentially too much of a documentary feel. But like I love the flaws of it and the way the colors mix and the weird, minutia from the halation that comes from like lights and overexposure and like kickbacks and filter reflections and all these little like artifacts that get saved. I think when people are pushing to make digital look like film, I think they just want it to feel cool. Like there's a part of that part of it's there, but like why I do it is I want people to kind of forget about the image. And I think images that are too sharp like my eye just looks at the pores. It just feels the artifice. Like it brings out all the things I don't like. At the same time, I'm not trying to, make it like an army of ants fighting with grain. What I'm looking for with grain is actually just to soften the image. I don't actually want people to like see the grain kernels. I just want to kind of step on it, if you will, so that you just kind of fall into the image and you're not being directed by like the resolution as much where to look. That's it. It's just kind of weathering it in a way, or making it a bit more timeless as opposed to saying we actually shot this. But then there's like small things like you can add halation in post to like, lamps and highlights and windows. And I love that. I think it adds a romance to the images. And I think it works in almost every situation. If you watch Deacon's work, it's the opposite of that. That stuff isn't really there. But at the same time, like when you have flawless actors and flawless sets and someone that's been like thinking about this shot for 3 months, it's probably going to work. Whereas if you're, scrappy and you're running and gunning and you're like, okay, master primes and this camera and the LF are probably not going to make this location look great. I should probably think of something else.
Sure. Yeah, that actually kind of brings me to a question I had, which was, I understand you worked in reality for a while.
Oh yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
What were you going to say? Sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say, doing that because I know you probably don't want to harp on it for too long, but
I'll talk about it. It's great.
I was wondering like what that taught you about narrative filmmaking, because obviously it's not the same thing, but like moving fast, lighting, effective lighting versus maybe lighting that's too nitpicky or anything like that. Like, did you kind of learn anything that you carried on into your narrative or music video or even commercial work?
Yeah, I forget, it was a year or two in LA, and I was working as a non-union electrician, trying to get my days for the union. I was one day away from getting into 728 when the writer's strike hit. So like,
Sick.
I was like, cool, my days are going to lapse. I'm not going to get into the union. What am I going to do? And my friend was working on Ace of Cakes, which was a TV show about a cake bakery in Baltimore. And he was like, we need like a camera PA. So like, I don't know why they just didn't get a local, but they flew me out there and I lived in a bakery for 2 weeks. And I hated it because I was in like a 10 by 10 room that just smelled of cake all day. I don't even know if the iPhone was out then. So I'm just reading like the same one. I think they had comic books in there. Anyways, I kind of just started doing with that company. I started doing all these smaller reality shows, like to different parts of the world, different parts of the US, and like loved it actually. It was just like 4 people rocking and rolling, following the talent around, meeting people, having to light rooms on the fly, like bouncing things around, having to light a bunch of interviews, which I actually really loved. I got to start working on portrait lighting. And we were actually trying to make it look real. Like the part of the shows we were going for is how can we make the interviews feel unlit, which I loved. And I got to just do some type of lighting to it. I think the thing that I noticed is reality TV operators are phenomenal at conversation and dialogue. And I remember just trying to like pan between 2 people having a conversation the first time, and like the DP walked over and he was like, we're going to look at the tapes tonight, dude. You have no idea what you're doing, do you? And I was like, I'm just panning. And he's like, no, you have to like feel it. And those guys can be like programmed differently, even sometimes better than narrative operators, I think, and that their reactions to like guessing what's going to come up. But I just basically just got to like, I call it reality, but in the end, it was probably closer to documentary, in that we were just dropped into a location. I wasn't doing the Love is Blind take on things. It was much more like me, a producer, and 2 other camera folks. Or I went to, went to Chile I had 70 cases in my room. And the first thing I did was lose the carnet. Yeah. And it was, I was doing that. I had 70 cases. I was the AC for all the cameras. I was C camera operator, and I was doing sound, which was, they taught me on the fly, like full pack, 6 wireless receivers or whatever, like chasing talent around. It was like, it was insane. I don't know why they let me do it. I'd never done it before. But it was a great way to travel, and I have great stories from doing that. It was a fun way to just see these kind of wild countries. But I mean, I basically just took away like from that, I don't know, kind of how to be scrappy and work on the fly, but also like how to operate around like non-actors was a big part of it, and kind of feel like the pace. And it's also interesting to watch like reality producers will, they'll stop someone talking and ask them to say it again, or they'll revisit something,
Oh,
to see how you can actually, like, they are inadvertently directing non-actors. And seeing some of them be really good at that is kind of like, because there are a lot of directors out there that like to work with non-actors now too. But I'm watching these, producers that are basically just directing scenes. And it was really cool to watch because they didn't actually think they were directing them, if that makes sense. They were just trying to get that bite or to get that little narrative chunk. But in reality, it's like, no, you're doing a great job directing, buddy. Just keep doing that. We'll get it.
That's cool. I did want to draw kind of a line. My first introduction to your work was actually Smooth Sailing, because I'm a big Queens of the Stone Age fan. Did you know that band before you shot that, or was that?
Oh yeah, no. Songs for the Deaf was like one of my favorite albums when it came out. And I have a couple of friends that were just obsessed with them. So I was really amped, and the producer on that too was a massive Queens of the Stone Age fan. So he was like really excited and really pushing Hero to do the video. He's like, we gotta do it. It was pretty fun to do that. I was like, oh, this is like, it's kind of rare that you get to sync up with like some of your favorite artists. And that was actually a good song too. Sometimes you do get to sync up with artists that you love, but the track you're working on is like, no, this isn't your best. But that actually was a great track.
Was there anything that you learned on that set, or because I've often talked about how in my head music and film are very similar, and I oftentimes have a hard time articulating why. And I'll be like, no, it's like Josh Homme will like do this thing on his guitar, that's like film, and I never know how to like explain, like get that out of my head in a coherent way. But I was wondering if on that shoot, if working with Josh or anyone else, kind of, what was that creative environment like?
I think he really, we kind of let him do his thing, and we got to really play around with it. And he was there and was watching us work with all of like the businessmen, and he saw like a lot of the video is, interpreted, like the swaying of being drunk is interpreted with the rhythm of the song, and that's why we had all these body camera mounts. He was very excited to put the mounts on, and get these very weird shots. It was, it was pretty fast and furious when we shot it. It's a bit of a blur. We shot in this little Tokyo mall in downtown LA, and we shot like in like a Korean restaurant to start, and then we like ran down an escalator, and then we went to a bowling alley that happened to have karaoke, and that's where we shot Josh for most of it, and then staged the fight outside of it. I forget. He was, I think it was this very silly video that had like a punk rock thing going with it, and he just kind of leaned into that. I remember he actually went too big and did some pretty outlandish stuff, and then after we shot it, he was like, you guys can't use that. Too far. Too far. I know it was my idea, but I just saw the playback, and we shouldn't use that. That's too much. He was having a good time.
Yeah. Because, it's interesting because, I found that and obviously didn't know Hero, didn't know you, just saw that. I was like, that's great. And then I remember seeing, it was like Sweatpants and This Is America, and going like, man, I really like these three separate, didn't think they were all the same like team or whatever. And so it was a very exciting aha moment. However, I think it must have been when This Is America came out, where I started to put all those pieces together and was like, oh shit, this is all the same people. How did you get involved with, I know people have probably asked you this, so I just didn't do that section of research, and then we'll get into the Daniels. But like, how did you get involved with Hero, and what does your guys' relationship look like, and then I'll ask another thing instead of loading you with 7 questions.
Here's a funny story. There's like bizarrely harkens back to like the film school question of like, why do you go to film school? I think when I graduated, one of the teachers or professors or whatever was like, you paid X amount of money to meet 10 people that will determine the rest of your career. He was like, that's why you went to film school. I was like, we were like, sure. And I met Hero because a friend of a friend was producing a small music video for Partisan, and he knew that I was like a younger DP doing scrappier stuff, and he was like, hey, check out my friend Hero. He's doing this project. And that's like the first time I got connected just randomly through someone who I kind of knew through school. Um, and I saw Hero's very first music video and it like blew me away. It's still one of my favorite music videos. And I was like, I need to work with him. And then I forget that the next video came for a band called Bus Driver. And I wasn't able to do it. And I was like, oh shit, I'm not gonna. It's the one where he's got the giant head and he's like a pinata or something. I'm trying to remember it. It's a very silly video. But I was super bummed I couldn't do it. I think the whole thing took place at like a Chuck E. Cheese, and he's like a Chuck E. Cheese type. Okay. I forget. It was very absurd. And this is back when Hero was doing a bit more of like outrageous pop stuff. But I felt like I'd missed the boat. And the very first thing me and Hero did together was a bubblegum commercial involving a unicorn, which was completely not either of us, but we kept trying to work together. And then we just started making these like dark, weird, music videos and every time we'd shoot, there'd always be, pickups, which is kind of unique to music videos. You don't really do that, but we'd always be like, well, what if we went back and got these one little, cut to me and him cruising around at night in like grocery stores or alleyways, trying to like find little details like that. But we just clicked. We got along really well, and we just felt like someone that I would have been friends with in high school. We just kept trying to play with themes that we've been working on throughout all of our projects, and he'd come with like a really weird idea and be like, what if we did this? And then we just kind of mess around. I think a lot of the work we made was because we had time to let things kind of marinate and metabolize before we shot it, so we could actually like bring themes and ideas to it, as opposed to like let's shoot next week and we'll just figure it out on the day. A lot of it is like just slowly figuring it out, and a lot of his treatments usually have a lot of interesting references that aren't direct visual references for what you want, but like a tone that you can kind of take and spin and put in a different direction.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because you guys have like super detailed videos like Sweatpants, and then super simple shit like the Chet Faker video, which I'm sure is a little more difficult to execute than just, we just put it on the back of a camera, but simple in premise. And I've seen so many people rip off that video. that video spawned a whole slew of copycat music videos.
The Chet Faker one?
Yeah.
There was a whole debate on Reddit if that was green screen. Like a huge debate about if it was green screen. No, yeah. No, it was baffling to me. Some very elaborate concepts. Someone even pitched that we had built like a treadmill of pavement or something. I don't know. It was a pretty great deep dive on people thinking, because we front-lit it kind of like the Fiona Apple video, Criminal. And then we didn't like how that looked, so we had rigged a Kino to the bottom of a truck and uplit it, which gave it this weird fake thing happening to it, and which I think is what kind of threw people off. But yeah, I'm not sure how many people thought it was green screen, but there was a good couple of days that Reddit just kept going.
Dude, I've noticed a lot of people overthink stuff like that. Like, the example I've used a handful of times is like, I grew up as a magician and kind of getting back into it now because I'm bored. But like, there's a trick where David Blaine puts a hat pin through his hand, and everyone has a lot of theories about how he does it. He puts a hat pin through his hand. That's how he does it. He fucking stabs himself in the hand or his bicep. Like, he just does it. And I think people don't want to conceptualize the simplest answer. Yeah, we put a camera on the back of a truck and had a bunch of people rollerblading. Like, it is what you saw it was. But I did want to know, when working with Hero, what aren't you guys doing? Is there like a list of things or maybe some stuff that you're just like, that's not us when you're doing projects with him?
We don't really shoot safeties. Like, we don't shoot coverage or stuff just in case. A lot of times you'll make some bold choices and you'll shoot a shot that's going to be the glue in the edit. And generally we don't really work on the fly that much either. It's a lot of the stuff Well, that's not necessarily true. I take that back. The things that we don't do. I don't think we don't expect to find things on the day. If that makes sense. I think we really like to figure it out. At the same time, everything we've done is like kind of fluid and evolves. But there's very little improv necessarily. Like it's fun to like thematically build something up. And then kind of get weird, like kind of create like a place to get weird. If that makes sense. I'm not sure if what I just said is makes sense at all, actually, because I'm not quite sure what we don't do. It very much feels it's different than I work with other directors, in that we generally are playing with an idea. I don't think we're directly defining that idea until we get close to shooting. Whereas some people are like, this is what it is. It's a oneer. There's a lot of, with Hero, there's a lot of, well, what if, like, even like for This Is America, I have a bunch of footage of me and him just walking around, like playing around with the opening shot. Like he'd sit in and play the guitarist and I'd be the camera, and then vice versa. And originally we were gonna have like kids run by, and then, well, what if he goes around the corner? Like we kept playing with how to do it and just kind of figuring it out on the day. I think a part of it is also just kind of being silly and you know, photographing yourself and trying to like figure out some visual way to communicate to someone else what you're doing. Yeah, I don't know. It's all kind of blurry. It's a very organic thing with him because we've been doing it for so long. It's less of like there's less of a checklist when we go into making projects together. It's more of like, we should start talking about the exciting stuff, or like, how the fuck do we do this? Is another big part of it.
Yeah. Before we get into the Daniel stuff, I did want to ask. I get the impression that you color a lot of your own stuff.
I used to color all my stuff, like right when I started. Apple Color came out. I'm not sure if that's still a thing anymore, but like it was a legit color grading program. I think DaVinci's free now.
It is. Which
what Apple Color really kind of was a breakthrough for me. That's what really helped me figure out a lot of photography, just like how to like, you know, what can you shoot and how far can you push it later? What's savable? What's too dark? What's going to give you inky black? Like I remember like building our first LUTs with like the HVX back in the day, and we had like a great secret sauce that gave us like a really good black by like crushing the toe in camera, so that way when you exposed it, you were actually filling your shadows in. So, anyways, it was like
that's good stuff. Yeah. You can rant about that for a hot minute. That's good. That's good info.
Yeah, no, we like back when, you know, camera settings were such a thing. Everyone had like the pedestal and like there's like I forget how many different sub menus we'd go through, but I had like my roommate got real nerdy and we basically took an HVX and another camera and like we just put the lens cap on them and looked at a histogram, and we saw the bottom line was like trembling, and then we kept taking the pedestal till a point where the bottom line stopped trembling. We're like, oh, that must be pure black, and we thought we were geniuses for doing this. And it looked great. It was really cool. I like gave like an edge to all of our like digital photography with deep focus. But that was like the first taste of like what Lux can do. Whereas now I don't like, I'm heavily involved in the color grade. I generally work with one colorist now, a guy named Alex Bickle, who's the bee's knees. He did Moonlight and a bunch of other movies, and I found him on a film called Kin, but he's been kind of doing every film with me, but he's as nerdy as me and wants to kind of keep kind of pushing and playing with the idea of like, what is live? Like, what are we chasing when we're doing all this stuff? Like, what are we actually trying to do? Are we just in like are we trying to make things look like film? Like, what does that mean to look like film? You know, are we just chasing, like, we're always chasing a good skin tone, which is range. You know, you want like film gives you skin that has like magenta and pink and red and green. And like, and a slew of other colors to it. And then, you know, with digital, a lot of times you get that patina of like, and it's just flesh. It's just this one tan. Yeah.
Me.
So giving that range is like what you're chasing. However, to like give you that amazing range, you usually have to do a lot to the image. And it fucks up the rest of the image. You know, you're like, oh, you just crank the reds and the blues and do all that, and then you like zoom out from the face, and you're like, the world's on fire. This looks insane. Like their skin looks great, but everything else looks terrible. So it's trying to find that middle ground of a LUT that will work for everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I used to do it a lot, and it really helps me understand what the hell I was talking about, and how power windows worked and how we could be subtle with them.
Yeah. The thing I wanted to know was, and you kind of touched on it, but like, in what ways did coloring inform your cinematography and vice versa? But also, you know, getting it in camera is always good, but what are you doing in the grade that pushes it over the edge? Because I've noticed that an Alexa can look like dog shit, and then in the hands of a good colorist, an Alexa can sing, you know? And so there's something happening, but it can't just be, you know, 709 LUT from Ari drop the exposure by 2 stops.
No, which was what I did for a long time, was just like 2 stops under 709. Like one of my favorite music videos, the Flylo video I did of Hero, was like 4 stops underexposed at 2000 ISO or something. That was probably more like 2.5 stops, but anyways, 2.5 stops underexposed, 2000 ISO, 709. And we shot it, and then we took it to our colorist Ricky, and we were like, you don't really have to touch much. And he barely touched it, and that was just like the look in camera just looked like, you know, that was us chasing film, which was like tearing the digital negative apart was the first approach. But now it's like polar opposite, in that I'm like, the trick of using LUTs now is, you, as opposed to like applying a LUT and color grading something, you want to start with it when you're shooting, because that changes everything. Because you want a LUT that's going to make you overexposed, because the more information you have, the more range you can create on skin. It also lets you make ballsier choices when you're making your exposures. You know, if you have like a really thirsty LUT that wants you to overexpose, you can be less afraid about doing a moody shot, because you know there's actually going to be more in there. Or you can just be a pansy like me and change the ISO to like a stop, like from like 800 to 400, and shoot it and be like, it'll be okay later. Yeah. But a lot of it now, because it does that, I can actually see much closer to the end product. You know, if you're like, hey, we want a LUT that's gonna give us purple shadows, you know, all of a sudden I can be like, oh, this scene needs way more fill because their face is purple, and I want the shadows just to be in there. I want the purple just to be in their hair or something. We can start up doing that. Basically, you want LUTs to be interactive on set, so that when you get to the grading process, you're really not making big swings. You know, you're just kind of finessing it, you know, smaller paintbrush strokes, and the LUT itself is like the big choice that you're making, and then you're shooting with it so you can actually feel it. And usually when we're shooting, we'll tweak and augment the LUT a bit, or boost the contrast. Or I just did a TV show where we had a LUT based on film stock from 1972, which was really fun to play with, because cyan doesn't exist in that film stock, so it doesn't look like modern films where cyan is in everything.
Interesting.
It was more like a cobalt blue, which was like a different, you know, all of a sudden like your shadows got inkier much quicker, and you had to like kind of light your nights differently.
Is there anything that you're doing in those LUTs that are kind of like, I don't want to say compulsive, but, you know, something that you're like, that you're always looking for? Because the look is always going to change, but are there some like tent pole adjustments that you're like, this looks good?
Well, usually for the LUT, each LUT we build per project, and I did an indie called To Leslie right after EAO, or like the year after. And we went to a motel and we shot, you know, 16 mil Alexa and 35, and we did the exact same frames for each shot. And then we did Ektachrome, 200T16, 500T16, and then 500T35 in Alexa. And it was really fun to put all those together, you know. So Alex was like, all right, here's film. And you're like, fuck, man, it doesn't look that different. It looks pretty close. And it was a little sad. And you were like, and then you're like looking at 200T16, and you're like, fuck, that looks a lot like 35. That grain's really tight. Like, should we shoot it on that? And then you'd go and we shot a night exterior. And we are like, okay, well, now film is shining. Like that's the last place I was thinking film's going to be great, but you have headlights and neons and all of that, and it just, you get that film look. You get these like colors and range and halation and burnout, and it just felt like we were, any night exterior when you have like, especially like say like older glass or something, it's going to feel very vintage. Yeah, so it was getting back to the question in terms of tentpole. We'll go and we'll shoot like the last TV show I did again set is about Watergate. So we went and shot like moody interiors in like a motel on stage. And we tested, 10 different lenses, and then we shot, front lit, back lit, side lit, warm lit, cold lit. And we just basically put it through the range, and then you kind of, a lot of it is always like I like high contrast generally. There's usually something I push for, and then I push for skin to pop. Like I want to have a LUT that recognizes that, like, right around the 60% at this type of, opacity or whatever, that they can actually arc. And I think Alex calls it spark is what he does. He adds it into a LUT that'll actually pop faces a bit more, or recognize that part of whatever spectrum and lift it a bit. So you don't have to light as hard.
Is it like a skin tone, like in the color curves? Is it just like a luminance boost in the skin tones?
It's a luminance boost, and I think a contrast boost in the area. There's so many crazy little things you can do now. Like he also has, I forget, now you can start isolating colors within skin. So you can just have red be boosted, but just in the range of skin.
Oh, interesting.
I forget. He's worth, if you want a good interview, he's like the best nerd of all time.
I would love that
type of stuff.
The reason I'm asking is because over the pandemic, I just got really I didn't have, anything to shoot, obviously. And so I really got into coloring and stuff, coloring all my own stuff and just learning about it. And definitely helped me work-wise, because I can really, it's the value add for the client or whatever, but very educational as well. So I'm always just trying to pick up like little tips.
Well, he's great because he's also, not only is he like the very, very talented colorist, like top tier, but he like runs and owns his own color house. So a lot of colorists you'll meet are very talented, but they have like a couple of assistants and they work for a big company. Like he knows the full thing top to bottom. He knows, what cables are going where. He knows what the system's running. He knows why your shit just shut down for no reason. Like he's like knows the full concept and execution of it, from like machines and guts to like over the top conceptual software ideas. Like it's really fun to actually dig into it with him, because he can tell you exactly what's happening.
I had not seen Interesting Ball until about 2 hours ago, but I had been running around after the screening at City Walk. I had been telling everyone like, yo, you got to go see this Everything Everywhere movie. It's fucking dope. Because I still haven't seen Swiss Army Man. And there was a bunch of people had seen that. And they're like, oh, if you hadn't, yada, yada, yada. But a few of my more educated friends, I suppose, had seen Interesting Ball whenever that came out. And we're like, bro, you got to watch. It's the same thought process. It's like the same thing. So I was wondering if what that shoot felt like at the time versus what you guys are doing now, but also just like how you feel you have progressed between those two projects, that one and Everything Everywhere.
Interesting Ball, trying to figure out why we made it. I forget if we had funding from somewhere. I think we used it as a camera test. It's like 3 different cameras. Like some scenes are on Red, some scenes are on like the Alexa. I wasn't even available for all of it because it was so pieced together over a course of a month. Like my first AC, Matt Sanderson shot the Broformers on the beach because I wasn't there for that. And I think he shot the Runaway Fridge, and I did the butt suckers and the ball, and then like the balls of fair. Right. And then a couple of the other scenes. I remember what it was. I had the restaurant scene of Wayman. It's funny that movie is.
There's another Wayman.
Back at it now. Yeah. Well, that name came from that Wayman, and that Wayman is in our movie as well. He is one of the followers of Jobu, and he's got a couple of shots. He's a fascinating actor. But I believe they loved his name so much that they were like, we'll name our main character after him.
Gotcha.
But yeah, if you watch that, you can see that swirling cosmic idea of, everything's connected, and what matters is what you do with it, not so much about what you could do with it. Um, uh, yeah, I don't how that road started. Well, we shot Swissy, and then, it hit, and it was, people loved and hated it. And I'm not sure how many people saw it, but, things were brewing, and the Daniels were doing like little commercials and some TV, and they just spent forever working on the script. Because I just saw it kind of build in pieces of like, we know how we're gonna do it conceptually. At one point, I tried to have them change the name to like everywhere, everything, everywhere, every time, so we could call it E3. But they didn't like that at all. I think the original name was called. I know, but I was like, it's just going to be cleaner to call it E3. It was originally called Bubbles. It kind of brewed organically. Like, I would check in with them, and eventually I got sent the script and read it. I remember reading it twice on a plane, and becoming very confused between the second and third act about who's doing what, and what Evelyn is alive and what Evelyn's dead. And even when you watch the movie now, I don't think most people know that like the main Michelle Yeoh that you've been following dies, and that you were actually following a different version of her through the film for the second half of it. But it feels like, no, she woke up, but no, she died. There's a different universe. She comes back to life. In the end, it doesn't matter though. But I remember
I'm glad you said that, because I was wondering that when it happened. I was like, wait, was that a wake up, or is this a new one? New one.
Yeah, no, it is. I believe technically it is a new Michelle. It is a new one because that one died, so she can't be brought back to life.
Right. That would be insane.
Yeah, I remember we tried to make the movie they kept talking about it, and they kept pushing, and I was terrified because I have my daughter was due to arrive when they wanted to shoot, and the dates kept moving because of talent. And then like, luckily, when we started prep, we timed it out. They kind of, we timed it around them, and they kind of timed it around me, and that like prep ended around the holidays, and my daughter was born basically on Christmas. So I had like a week with her or two, and then we jumped into the film, which was pretty surreal. Because there was a moment where I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to shoot this. Like, if my daughter's born during the shoot, I'm not going to not be there. But magically, she arrived at Christmas when no one was shooting. So it worked out. Yeah, I know, it's been a funny path. I mean, I did a bunch of things since Swiss Army Man, but the Daniels, they were just kind of occasionally not day playing, but like jumping into direct episodes of TV and doing commercials, and really just working on this and figuring it out. As you can tell, there's a lot going on in that movie. And even sometimes I'm like, where did this idea come from? Like, I get everything else, but where did that idea come from? Like, what made you think that was going to be the idea to throw in there? Like Raccacoonie, I was like, why? Why is this in there? I love
Raccacoonie.
Everything else I get, but I was like, what was this one about? You just wanted to go for it. It was actually a nod to Interesting Ball in the Raccacoonie story. When she's running on Harry, in Interesting Ball, the Broformers are all running, kind of falling apart, and I believe they throw one of the bros at the end so he can reach his goal. And we did the same thing with Raccacoonie. She ends up throwing Harry towards the raccoon. You don't even actually see him get to his raccoon. You can just tell he's probably going to get there. That was a hard reference to their previous work.
It's so much fun. I did want to know though, how are you conceptualizing each look? Because there are some really overt references in this film to other films, and I'm sure there's some that are more subdued. And I was wondering, like, which films were you referencing that weren't obviously their own? But then also, how were you conceptualizing all these format changes, all these lens changes? Like, what was the reasoning behind each one beyond, that's the film you're referencing? I assume the pre-production process was a little intense.
Yeah. We tried to collect all the universes, and I built a big PDF of, what I like about, you know, what were thematics. I wanted no universe was a direct like it is this movie. It was more, to me, it was more of like this it is a memory of this movie or these movies. It was the idea of what something felt like as opposed to what it looked like. So even like in the Wong Kar-wai verse, we're actually a lot more colorful than in The Mood for Love. Like in The Mood for Love is actually not colorful at all, except for like two very specific shots. And ours is like soaked in neon. But it feels like it because you have, you know, Raymond's dressed like Tony. You know, Michelle is like, it's very elegant, and we are clearly going for In the Mood for Love. But it's more of like, it's what I think people think in for the mood, what people think In the Mood for Love feels like.
Right.
Because when you watch it, it's actually just, it's tungsten light exposed for tungsten. Like it's actually kind of, it's beautiful, but like it's bland in terms of color. It's just very bare. And we did the opposite of that. We're like hard saturation. We'll go for it. But we made a PDF, and then me and costumes and makeup and hair all sat down and kind of talked about the theme for each universe. And again, I think we made a color palette list for each universe, but then also we talked about what colors should not be in there. And I think choosing which colors you don't want is sometimes a stronger choice. Kind of like, you know, with Spike Jonze's Her, they chose to remove the color blue. Completely changed how that film looked. For this one, we like, you know, we tried to save certain colors. So like the laundromat New Year's Eve party red is the predominant color for that. And we tried to keep it out of as many other universes as we could. You know, the subtler ones are like the Rakakuni universe is our PTA universe, even though it's not at all. But that was the theme of like these very bold, rich, like 1998 colors, like these like real blues and like fleshy skin. And if you watch it, you would be like, no, this is not, you know, but it's like anamorphic. It's like bold skin tones, locations. We didn't have time to really light them the way they would have been lit. Like Magnolia has some like phenomenal lighting, and, you know, if we had time and money, we would have brought condors and lit the shit out of it. But it was like, no, we're just going to use the street lights because we have 2 hours to shoot her running on top of a man's back, chasing a raccoon in a truck. So we just had to go with it. But it was like you start somewhere small. Hot Dog Hands started with Carol as a reference, and then very quickly left that concept because Carol's too stunning and we just couldn't do it in our locations. It was like, we could say we did, but we're not gonna, that's not what we're doing. Yeah. 2001 was just like, bizarrely, we got lucky, I think, with that one. Like we found rocks next to the stages we were doing pickups for and just timed it with the right time of day. And we shot on old Tadeo lenses that were barely in focus. You know, that's also, we only had one monkey. We had two monkeys. I take that back. So all the wide shots was just, you know, Daniel Schreiner in a monkey suit just running around to different parts of the rock, pretending to be a monkey, and then they just comped it all together. Right. The Alphaverse was, which is mainly just in that van that Waymond is in with his buddies. It's supposed to be in a hot desert, but on the day I tried to sell that it was more of like the Battle of Hoth, because the costumes that the Alpha people were wearing reminded me so much of Star Wars that we just pushed the idea of like a bright, snowy day exterior kind of pumping in through the windows. And then in the LUT, or in the grade, we like went a bit harder, and I think we went down to 16 mil grain at one point and then came back because it was doing too much damage to the image. But we wanted to make it kind of bristly and over the top and just very kind of bright and blown out. And the Bagelverse is like, I think I was saying, it's like an amalgam of like memories of like films from my childhood. And I'm trying to remember what their direct references were, but, you know, Never Ending Story, like the princess from that was it's kind of clicked in my brain. This weird crystalline palace lynchy thing happening. There is also like the Black Rainbow film was also like a theme in that, this like these like very stark images of these weird lifted blue shadows. Just the kind of like flawed film is like a is it Beyond the Black Rainbow? Is that the film? You know what I'm talking about?
I haven't seen it, so I do not know.
It was just kind of, again, it's one of those weird like, what was your memory of this scene, like when once you see it, as opposed to like, this is exactly that. Like, you know, Swiss Army Man was a million references, but, you know, my main reference for that was Hook. because I was like,
Sure.
it's two lost boys in the woods, and like we're gonna go really big with warm fire and colors, and make it feel like they just threw it together. But yeah, no, I think we slowly built upon it, and the bigger thing was actually trying to create the look for the action universe, which was like trying to figure out, what's the big choice we make for this. And we shot a ton of different angles at the laundromat and at the IRS building, and then we brought it back and gave it to Alex Bickle. And he sent us like 4 variations on different stocks, and we showed it to the directors. We'd pick 2 and then debate them. We ended up on like a Fuji look, which kind of gave us cyan shadows, which was really fun for a building like that, and had really beautiful skin tones for that type of skin. But even in the grade, I was like, there's too much cyan in the movie, we got to get rid of it, it's killing me. And Alex was like, you have to just embrace it, it's a theme, you gotta live with it. And then I think the dumbest one we did was for Hot Dog Hands, the musical, which was shot in the same location as the Wong Kar-wai universe. Literally, they're on the stairwell. They're in the stairs first time they meet, and it's really beautiful. And then the reverse angle of that is the Hot Dog musical, which is like a weird fountain. And that was based on The Sound of Music, and Alex made a really cool LUT that did that whole Technicolor, like purple pink skin with like weird shadows. And that was one of the first LUTs that we built. And the Daniels were like, oh wow, this is like a LUT. it's like doing like the Scorsese Aviator thing, where it's really going for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun to get to actually have an excuse to do those for a good reason.
Yeah, it's what lenses, because you said you had like a shit ton of them, like what lenses did you have on the film?
I'll get real specific.
There you go.
Where is it? Here we go.
I can't imagine for that budget you had full packages of each.
No. I mean, I've been trying to go through the same camera house, Keslow, because they've been friends for like awesome. A long time. And, I think the idea is, you bring them big stuff. Like I was like, hey, let's do the pickups for Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2. We did all the pickups for that through Keslow, or like, do all your commercials through one house, so that when you do get to a passion project, you're like, hey, we have no money, but remember all like the, all those dumb things we shot that had budgets? Like this one is an awesome thing that doesn't have a budget, Right. And they were, they've been wonderfully kind and supportive, and really never said no. Because we asked, what did we do? We had Hawk V lights for the action universe, which is, if you can't get Panavision anamorphics, to me, that's your best bet in terms of it's got decent. They had just come out with a macro anamorphic 50 mil, which became like a huge 55 mil, which became a huge workhorse because minimum focus is so garbage on most anamorphics. That a lot of it was shot on that lens. And then the majority of the like normal world, or like the apartment stuff, or the laundromat, was shot on Zeiss super speeds. And then we had, for the first 6 weeks, we had an Atlas Orion anamorphic and the Scorpion anamorphic, because we wanted to have wider anamorphics that didn't distort. And the Scorpion is literally like a soulless lens. Like it is super clean, but it has no funk. And then the Orions are actually like, I think you're going to see a lot more of those coming up. I think Linda Sandgren and Fraser are shooting with them a bunch now, but they're like the super speeds of anamorphics, if that makes sense, and that they're like sharp. They don't distort that much, but they're still just enough, like, they've been stepped on just enough that there's like an edge to them, but at the same time, they feel clean. Open. Oh yeah. Then we shot the Cook anamorphics as well. We use them for anamorphic zooms. We had an Optimo zoom. And then the day play lenses were the Super Baltars. I want to say that was Hot Dog Hands. And then the Tadeos were the Bagelverse, but they may have been too crazy for that. We may have switched to Hawks in the middle of it. And then we shot Canon K35s for the Wong Kar-wai verse.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's just that. I assume this is the most involved film you've worked on in that regard.
Yeah, I think so. like I mean, it's funny because it's the most involved film when you jump on a TV show and it's like, here's 8 hours of material for you to go shoot, and you're just like,
Right.
Jesus Christ. But still, you don't remember it the way you remember the work you put in on movies. Um, yeah, no, I'm impressed that we didn't. I take that back. We also shot 16 mil glass as well. So all of the Michelle, when Michelle decides to not leave of Waymond and she decides to stay in town and becomes a martial arts superstar, all of that, majority of that was shot on 16 mil zoom. Specifically, also when she's like working out with the master and like the tiny
Right.
garden that is shot in Elysian Park. It's like all of that stuff is shot in Elysian Park in Chinatown.
The Kill Bill universe, so to speak.
Yes, that one exactly. Yeah, those are all. A lot of that was just 16 mil zooms, which are really fun to play with. But yeah, it was. I mean, it wasn't necessarily daunting. It was like that's the stuff you look forward to, right? That you get to like pick lenses and do tests and like make some really stupid ideas and choices and build LUTs. Ultimately, a lot of it was the look really comes more from location and costumes, and then the lighting, like the glass and the LUTs are helpful, but we did a lot more with like what was actually in front of the camera. We shot a lot at some old stages called DC stages where they just had standing sets that are terrible, just like can only function from one angle. And they're gone now, but that's like a whole ton of the universes were shot there. Like half of like the Michelle, like in her when she's doing martial arts TV shows, when she's doing martial arts tournament, and there's like the whole prison sequence when they're like walking through a row of prison cells.
Oh, right,
like,
right.
Yeah, and then we also shot like the young Michelle when she's blinded and her father is singing to her in bed. And the pizza universe was shot outside in the parking lot, and then the school bus where Jobu like tries to run in the traffic was shot in the parking lot, and then the bar down the street is the bar from Always Sunny, where that's the first time you see Joy as Jobu. It was like we shot all of those in one day. You'd shoot like like that last week was like every shot was a new scene. It was like, here's the shot.
Gravy.
Run in, get it. I mean, it was and we're used to doing that.
How big was the crew? For that,
it was pretty small. We didn't even on the film. We had a budget of 15. I have no idea where the number 25 million. That's what I keep seeing on the internet. Keeps popping up, and I was like, if we had that number, it would be a very different film. It was actually surprisingly scrappy in that we didn't have any rigging teams. So like the lighting department, like run by Matt Ardeen, who's my friend that I met the first day of college, who's been gaffing with me now for over a decade. He had no one to rig anything, and so part of shooting in that building was we would we basically just send our best boy, a guy named Mike Beckman, around on stilts because we had so many Titans in the building. He spent like days upon days on stilts, just walking around like a monster, basically just changing out tubes and moving things around, and just kind of slowly attacking things that were going to be coming up in the days ahead. It was kind of absurd.
Were those Titan tubes playing as practicals, or were you like hiding them to be film lights?
We played them as practicals for several sequences. There's like a sequence where Michelle or Evelyn meets Jobu for the first time in a hallway after Jobu like kills 3 cops, and the lighting's going kind of wild. And there's all these different chases that are happening, and you have to install them, and then you have to because of the delay in wireless, you have to run cable to all of them. So then you have to actually get into like the guts of the building and run cables down so you can break them into pixel mode so you can actually do these kind of crazy chases.
Right.
So it took a long time to rig. And we didn't have a rigging team, so the on-set crew just got very slim. Be like Matt and like an electrician, and then everyone else was just out rigging lights for something coming up like a day from them and hoping we could get it done in time. We also the atrium. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I was just going to say, like, what was that lighting package like, and how are you keeping it small? But
we didn't have enough money to actually light the atrium, so we were shooting in winter, and so the atrium is lit from a giant skylight. So like when we lost the light at 5 p.m., we lost the light. We're like, all right, well, I guess we're done shooting in the atrium now, and that's where a ton of the scenes happen. So I think when we were doing the fanny pack fight, we shot incredibly, we had to do all of the dialogue in the whole area, which is really frustrating because there's a lot of dialogue of her like seeing the divorce papers and getting to the elevator and Alpha Women and her punching Jamie, and then we had to do the fanny pack fight. We had to shoot as much as we had to shoot everything looking out the atrium first, and then when we turned around, we had like an 18K that we could kind of bounce into the ceiling, but even still, it didn't look good. Like, because the light is like this very diffused directional top light, and then we're trying to like bounce this broad light across the room, so it gets a little like, you know, it gets a little sketch in terms of lighting. And then for the finale, when they're on the staircase and they're, you know, they're making their way up and it's all lit from above, we only could afford blanket lights for one half of the atrium, so we would have to shoot like the pinky fight, and then the next day we'd have to, like, you know, spend 3 hours moving lights from one side of the atrium to the other so we could shoot the staircase fight. It would have been a lot nicer just to light the whole thing, but we were like, even that was like a big not fight, but it was a big hurdle for production just to get the lights to light the atrium appropriately for that. Yeah, it was pretty scrappy in that regard. That we and again, like, now I'm working on most movies and TV shows I work on, we have a fully dedicated rig team. Like, their job is to just, you know, go on our scouts. We walk up, sets are rigged, and on this one it was like, no, our main unit's just doing that when it has time. And we were able to do it again because we spent 30 days in that one building.
Right. Did I hear correctly that you were using a handful of split comps to just hide lights places that you wouldn't otherwise get them?
I love doing that. I like doing that as much as I possibly can, because I know it's pretty easy. I don't remember doing it too often in this, but I think anytime there were scenes of stunts, I was like, well, we're going to be pulling ceiling tiles and putting in cables there anyway. It's like, why don't I just throw a light on there and just, you know, copy paste, you know, one drop ceiling to the next. But we didn't do it too often. I wasn't actively seeking it out. I remember the first time, like, hearing about it, I think hearing you could do that. Obviously Deakins did that in the Shyamalan film. And he literally had 18K be the moon, and they just painted out the stand. But like Adele's first music, her big hit video, I was like, man, she looks great. How are they lighting her? And then I found out, like, later, it's like, oh, there was a C-stand with a fluorescent just in the shot, and they just painted it out. That's why I'm like, how is she lit? Like, there's no lights in the room, and then that's what they did. But no, for this one, we were also just moving too fast for me to even get that creative. And like, I'll put a light here. A lot of the movie was spent trying to make the building look different. So we started very bright, and then we started just turning things off and trying to go for like a Die Hard feel, and getting pretty dramatic. There's like, Wayman has like a big monologue about how the world's changed. Nothing tastes the same when they're like in a dark hallway with like security lights beeping and there's no light coming in. And I was like, yeah, this feels right? No one will question why this hallway's dark. It was just kind of just leaning into the film pretty strong at that point.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but having I'm using chaotic because I have no other word to use, but I don't mean it as a negative. Having such a chaotic script does, I feel like, allow you the freedom to kind of do shit like that where no one's going to people have too many other questions to question why this thing is gonna be dark.
Yeah, no, Daniels are, I think there's someone said they're maximalists to a degree. But I think they just like to take bold swings. And I like to take bold swings too. I feel like if the audience has time to question, like, why is this hallway dark? Or like, why is it there? Something else in the movie is wrong. Like, you fucked up somewhere else. If they have time to like break away and start debating your creative choices or logical choices. Unless it's like something truly egregious, it's like, no, they're just, the building's in chaos and this hallway, the lights are off because they're, our production designer kept setting up, an office under construction hints throughout the opening act, throughout the film, also to justify like places that could be moody or like the lights don't work or like, the butt plug fight is in totally a staged construction site. Like, it's like, oh, there's a construction site here. How do we do this? Because we already had done like, the fanny pack was a fight in an office space. And I was like, well, how do we do another office space fight without making it feel the same? And I was like, oh, we'll just we'll just have dramatic low lit, work lights on the floor, and that's going to be the look for that scene.
Yeah.
It was a bit, it's a bit cheeky, but it was still fun to do. Like, and they like leaning into that.
Yeah. I would love to talk to you more, because like your whole music video and commercial world, I think we could dig into a lot more, but also this film has a lot to talk about. But I have to do another podcast in 5 minutes. So I have to go now, this is the first time I've ever come up against my own schedule, which sucks. But I'll end. Hopefully we can have you back on when next time you're free. I know you've had a pretty rough Sunday, and especially working on a TV show right now. But well, hopefully I have you back. But I do want to end on the same 2 questions I ask everyone. The first one being, do you remember something you've read, or maybe a piece of advice that you got? It doesn't have to be the one, but just something that kind of has stuck with you throughout your career as a cinematographer.
There probably was at some point. I think I forget, some director once said, he was like, think about your choice now, but think about your choice in 7 months from now if it was the right choice. Meaning, like, whatever you do on set right now, is it good for now, or is it good for later? And that, like, when you get to the final product, did you make the right choice? And that comes from different areas. It's a creative thing of like, were you just getting bored of how the film looked and you wanted to change it up, so you broke the theme? To also, like, you should push yourself for greatness if you can, because 7 months from now you're gonna be like, man, we should have done another take, or I should have just turned that fucking light off, even if it was awkward for the actors. I should have just fucking turned that light off. That's what's kind of been sticking to me lately, is the idea of like, don't take the easy path.
Yeah.
Sometimes. And it's more like, don't take the awkward path. Or you're afraid to take the awkward path of like, I just need to do this one thing, or like, I should really say we should do another take because I think we need it, or something like that. And then, because you got to be like, grit your teeth and be like, 7 months from now, I'm going to be thanking myself. But right now, I'm not happy.
Yeah. It's the combo of that thing Fincher said, where like the DVD is forever.
Yeah. He said, I'm making a film for 10 years from now.
Yeah.
That's what he's like, I'm not making it for now. I'm making it for 10 now. When people are at a party and they say, hey, did you see that movie that ends with a head in the box?
Yeah. But also the thing that you're saying, that every time I don't do this, I kick myself. It's like, if I have an instinct, I just do it. So like, if it's, simple shit, like if I'm leaving the house, I'm like, am I going to need that like sticker? Maybe I should bring some stickers with me. And I don't. Then I find myself in a situation where someone's like, oh, I loved your podcast. Can I have some stickers? Fuck, every time. So I'm sure when you're on set and it's like, I should, whatever, turn off that light or whatever it may be. Yeah, better to just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good part.
Yeah. Second question. This is going to be a hard one because of this film, but it's usually if you're programming a double feature with Everything Everywhere, what is the second film?
The Daniels said, Turning Red, the new Pixar film, is kind of a sister film to this in a way. It's a story that uses basically an extreme concept to tackle the idea of generational love, and how to do that and also make it very entertaining. I think they're both a good variation on that. There's sister films kind of funny to this because it's so maximalist. I'm trying to think of like another film that would be the inverted version of this, like the simplified version of this. I don't know. I mean, The Matrix is obviously the biggest touchdown. But Turning Red,
Matrix, that one's very. There are some.
I mean,
do you know? Fuck! I wanted to ask about Bill Pope. Why was he there?
He shot Shang-Chi, and I think Michelle got him a ticket, and Michelle's in Shang-Chi.
I see. Okay. Because I was like, I want to talk to him too. Yeah. No one's gonna understand what that means, but I was very like, he was like sitting like 3 rows in front of me, and she was like, "And there's Bill Pope." I was like, "Wait, hold on, what?"
You can get him on the podcast. He's great. He's amazing. I love his interviews. He's spicy.
I'd absolutely love to. All right. Travis has joined my meeting and I haven't started it. All right. I'm going to go. Thanks so much, man, especially for the extra time. And like I said, I'd love to have you back because your body of work is really admirable. I don't want to say envious because that sounds creepy, but you've done a really good job for yourself so far.
Thanks for having me on, dude. I really appreciate it.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F at Art Mattbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.